Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hans Gallant. I am co-founder and CEO at Beyond Trucks. We are a process automation platform for fleets.
My name is Natasha Martinez. I run up the carrier success for Beyond Trucks as well.
Wonderful. So we'll start a little bit about my personal history. My great-grandparents started a beverage distribution business in a corner store. It was really a corner store that turned into the largest beverage company in Switzerland, and they ran trucking fleets. What I learned from them is actually nothing about trucking, unfortunately, because the company was very large and now is very small, didn't handle the generational transition very well. But I learned from them a lot about the value of perspective and taking a new perspective in your own business. So my great-grandfather actually made a small fortune, not in beverage distribution, but by buying sugar just before World War II broke out and the borders were shut, and he suddenly sat on a truckload and a trainload of sugar and became very wealthy. Now suddenly, his change in perspective was about not thinking of himself as being in the beverage business or the distribution business. He suddenly realized he was in the sugar business and made a fortune being in the sugar business. So much about the value of thinking about your business slightly different. Thinking about the problem you're solving as very different. So if you're a carrier, maybe your problem is not to move things from A to B, but it could be processing information, processing data, finding new solutions, and then getting to unexpected results. So the value of new perspective is something we'd like to share with you today in our presentation. At Beyond Trucks, we have a team of about 50 people who deal with automation in trucking companies. We don't automate the drivers. That's not the business we're in. We're in the business of automating the business activities. And some of it can be automated, others cannot. So making that distinction is something very important. We're very committed to our industry, so we work intensely with some of the logos you see up here. We work intensely with people who are moving into the next generation or taking on the business from their parents or great-grandparents. And we work intensely on research and industry publications. So we are the first fully integrated process automation platform for fleets. We automate workflows that deal with running the business of a trucking company. So let's take a new perspective on cost. There's three things. We talk about the new perspective on cost. We will talk about an example of a 300-driver fleet that decided to take a new perspective along with us, and then a new approach to solving problems. This is data that is published every year by ATRI, the American Trucking Research Institute, which, as you may know, surveys the carriers in the country about what are the top problems they face. It's fuel prices. End of last year, we're up 44%. Driver shortage. We're short 78,000 drivers in the United States. Truck parking. Driver compensation is up 11% year on year, end of last year. And as we all know, the market is really tough. So spot rates by the end of last year were down 15%. When I last checked for March, they were down 25% year over year. It's a tough environment to run a carrier in. But the problem with all of these things, unless you're the ATA or unless you're an industry association that can go to Washington, D.C. and lobby for you, you as a carrier have very little things you can do about these items. They're all macro factors that are essentially out of your control. But there's things that are within your control as a carrier. How do you choose to work? What tools do you use? And how do you process data and store information? How did we work in the past? I think we all still know that this is the way we used to, in this industry, used to work. And there's a certain romantic idea with working as a driver and a suitcase in your truck. Most of our work today looks like this. So very different, right? What does that mean? Today, we are not only about moving things, we're also about moving information and communicating. The question is, how will that look tomorrow? Today, one of the biggest things that we see with carriers is that information that travels into a motor carrier is very fragmented. It comes in by phone, it comes in by fax, it comes in by email, it comes in a PDF and an Excel. or it comes in an EDI or an API. Very different channels. Problem is, if you're at the receiving end, you're really struggling with all these different things. That's how your work looks. You have an ELD, you have a TMS, you have an accounting system, you have 5 different broker apps. Your customer wants you to be in Macro Point or Project 44. You have 1 or 2 fuel cards, maybe 1 for your owner-operators, 1 for your own company drivers, and then you process payroll on ADP or QuickBooks or TriNet. And of course, everyone has Google Sheets and Excel. We all work in Google Sheets and Excel. And we sometimes think they're the blessing of our existence because anything we can't track in the TMS, anything we can't track in accounting, we'll have a separate Google Sheet, and ideally we color code it. So what does this problem, fragmented data and antiquated fragmented tools, mean? It means that there's lots of costs in your business that you actually don't know about. And secondly, you actually don't see it. There's very poor visibility. You don't really know what's going on. One of our customers, fleet, about 700 drivers, came to us and said, it was the financial controller, said, Hans, you know, my dream would be if I can pull a financial report by the 15th of every month. And I said, by the 15th of every month, you should be able to know at any time how well your business is doing. You shouldn't have to wait till the 15th of every month to know how well you did in the previous month. So that's a problem that's usually somewhat related to where the data comes from and how the many tools are connected or not connected with what you process them. So beyond trucks, we spend a lot of time with carriers researching their processes. So with a small carrier, we spend a day or 2 in their operations. With large carriers, it could be a week or 2 weeks. And we look at all the different processes and workflows they have internally to handle their work. And what we find is about $10,000 in every carrier per driver on average in the industry that's hidden in these processes. If you think about this, on average, it's probably as good as the profit of 1 truck. So you can either improve your process or you can add another truck. Well, buying another truck costs you a lot of money. Improving your processes will cost you some, but not necessarily as much as a new truck. Where's this cost? It could be inefficient use of labor, lots of manual data entry. It could be that you switch from a phone text message to your TMS to a Google Sheet, and while you switch, you forget about something. It's lots of mistakes, human error. We all make errors. It could be that your driver is taken in with a certain expectation to be dispatched in a certain way, but by the time that driver gets dispatched, the dispatcher forgot about it. Driver turnover. Could be you're failing your customers, your deliveries are late, you're not meeting your scorecards, you have customer turnover. Or it could just be you don't know what's going on, as a result you make decisions that are not particularly smart. So this hidden cost can come in many different forms. Again, it's about $10,000 per driver on average, so it is actually quite meaningful. How does it compare across different sizes of carriers? So we broke this data down into below 25 and in different tranches up to more than 100. And we see that large carriers actually have more hidden cost. Why is that?
Why is that?
Large carriers get more complex. Like large carriers have more managers, they have bigger organizations. They also have to have more control processes to keep the organization together. When you're a small carrier with 25 drivers, you know every driver, you know your financial control. You don't need to have checks and balances. You pretty much run a tight ship. Now, the big carriers make up for that because they buy cheaper fuel, their equipment is cheaper, their insurance is cheaper. So you will make up for it, but it doesn't mean that you should spend $12,000 per driver per year if you are a 100-driver carrier. There's still things to be taken out. Also, where this cost is hidden is very different. For small carriers, it tends to be manual work, human error. The large carriers who have bigger teams, do more checking, double and triple checking, typically have hidden costs in driver turnover. Their driver turnover is much higher, or their customer turnover is higher. So where that cost sits is a little different. we have, if anyone is interested in that data and a little bit more research, we have our colleague Albert, who is here. Albert, raise your hand. He has copies of the research. So if you want some, drop by on the way out and pick up some of the research and grab one of our business cards. So this is research based on about 400 carriers in the US of different sizes. And I'm going to pass it to Natasha to talk about a real case of a customer we work with and where we analyzed these processes and workflows and identified hidden costs.
Sure. You can go to the next one. So we're going to talk about a tanker company that's based out in the New England. They're one of the largest fuel tanker companies in that New England area. And they're going through a couple of different things. Generational change, so they're on the 3rd generation, so they have younger blood coming in. But they also had a pretty intense TMS system, a little bit older system that was, but the fact that they still had a TMS and they were still doing a lot of manual data, and we'll show you some pictures of kind of what it looked like. We actually spent a lot of time in the actual operations with the team. So we're actually sitting with the people doing the physical work to actually understand what they're doing every day and how we can help them. So they have 5 terminals, 12 different entities. Again, for 350, they have 12 entities, and that's because they also, not only do they move the fuel, but they also purchase, they also buy fuel, they also do multiple commodities, and they break it all down. So it made it much more complex. We weren't going in to solve one problem, we were really going in to solve multiple problems. We actually found more problems than they even realized they had while we were down in their operations, right? A lot of tribal knowledge comes from that, that dispatchers have been on the ground for 20 plus years. They just know the customer, they know what they want, and they know how to dispatch the driver, they know what driver goes to what truck, they know all that good stuff. But how do you allow that person to go on vacation? How do you allow the owner to go on vacation without having to be able to have that phone all the time? So what we did was actually take what's in their head and put it down into a product. So they actually, one of their steps, what they do is they deliver fuel to the majority of marathons, BP, and they also do gas stations for grocery store with gas stations. And they have to actually go into every different customer has a different monitoring fuel system. So nothing triggers anything to get fuel to these gas stations. So what they were having to do is go into these different portals, read it, write it down, and then they had a different spreadsheet that did their calculations for them. So think about it this way. I know that that this customer is gonna use 10,000 gallons today. I know I can bring 5,000 gallons in my truck. I know it's gonna take me 2 days to get there. Then they were doing their calculations backwards. And then they were figuring out when they were gonna send that truck, okay? So on top of that, every customer that they go pick up for has a specific PIN number, because if anybody's ever had to go to Iraq to go pick up fuel, you just can't be anybody going in there. So all that back-end data lived in somebody's head and then on a piece of paper that they put into a spreadsheet and put into their TMS at the same time. And this is kind of what their older TMS looked like. So for many carriers that are a little bit larger that have TMSs, you probably have a very nice window-based looking TMS. That worked great 20 years ago when nobody had a TMS and you were trying to get some type of automation. The difference in what these older TMS products are doing is they have less flexibility to make changes to adapt to what the life looks like today for a carrier. So they were manipulating around this. They were using this, but they were also using multiple spreadsheets. You can go to the next one. This is what their dispatchers look at every day to figure out where their trucks are, who they have, and where they're going. I have a TMS, I have a spreadsheet, I also know what I'm doing. They also print out still paper, and they do this. Now, this is probably, most companies have had this at some point at time if you started out or moving up, you've got this whiteboard. But again, their biggest problem was a magnet falling off, because then they would lose a magnet, they didn't see it, and they would literally have fuel run out at a gas station down the street from them. That's the problem.
No, I want to say, there's actually a lot of logic and reason why they do this.
Lots of logic
right?
to it.
They are operating in a very dynamic environment where they may have said this gas station is going to use 30,000 gallons today, but a blizzard hits and it ends up using 40,000, and they need to change dispatch schedules on the spot.
Right.
This tool actually allows them to do it, but it comes with a cost of the magnet dropping and the card dropping and the driver stepping on the load card and forgetting that there's a load to be picked up.
And then think about there's other, I'm not sure if anybody in the audience has actually a tanker company or have ever worked for a tanker company, knows anything about hauling on tankers, especially when you're hauling chemicals. There's a lot of logic that goes into it. What are you carrying? What can I go top load? What can I not top load? What chemical do I have today? What diesel am I doing? A 2-compartment, 3-compartment? There's tons of logic that goes into it, right? So you're having to figure out how do you help them make the best decision. You can't take the person out of the end result decision, but you can narrow down what they're looking at every day. So this is a kind of a high level of what their workflow look like. And this is one of the things that we do that's a little bit different than most technology type companies is we actually do come in, we sit with you, we understand, we flow chart everything out of what you're currently doing, and we say, here's every time a hand touches it. Think about that. Every time you're manually doing something, you're putting yourself up for error, not by fault, just by keying something in. Okay, so we talked about the manual work and then the break. So we talk about the rate of what everything, like the pay of what everything's going to be and how much money you're going to spend in it. It's not just about the time and the effort your person's putting into it, right? It's about what could go wrong when you're doing it. This is every time the exact same workflow. Then we show them this is what happens when your systems don't talk to each other. Every time it doesn't talk to each other, you're double checking, you're triple checking, you're actually getting maybe multiple people involved to help make a decision, and then you're keying it in one spot, keying it into another spot, and the two aren't talking to each other. So you've got dispatcher A and dispatcher B setting setting up one driver with two separate loads. Had that happen actually yesterday with a separate customer that we're currently on site with today. So think about it this way. If you look at all the different areas and your workflows are kind of going up and down, you're double checking, you don't know, and one thing that we find is because you double check is because you don't trust yourself. You don't trust yourself because there's not one source of the truth anywhere in what you're currently doing.
So very fascinating. There's actually a lot of research on making mistakes. In any trucking company, we always worry about making mistakes. And if our team, our staff makes mistakes, we punish them. But the truth is, we all make terrible mistakes. This is statistical data from very large sample sizes on what error rates generally are. So if someone is just tasked with keying in data, let's say our customer who copies a website fuel inventory at a gas station into their spreadsheet, on average, you make 1 to 1.2% errors. Just like anyone does it. It's not meaning that you're good or bad. It's just on average. Average person makes 1% errors.
So if you have a non-average person doing it, that means it's more.
Basic calculations, multiplication, additions, on average, 3 to 5% errors that everyone makes in our work. Now, our best friend, Excel and Google Sheets, don't we all love them? Believe it or not, if you have 10 formulas in a Google Sheet, there's almost a 50% chance that you're wrong. If you're running your fleet in a Google Sheet or an Excel, there's probably an average spreadsheet has 10 formulas. It's also a 50% chance that you're wrong. If it has 100 formulas, and that's when you do financial models or accounting models, with 100 formulas, there's a 100% chance that you have at least one mistake in that sheet. So just think about this, how you run your business and where you expose your business to mistakes. Here's another example, driver retention. How do processes and information flows affect driver retention? This is a very common example of a carrier with about 600 drivers. The recruiter puts an ad up. In this instance, it's advertised at $144 to $168 in compensation per year. Driver applies, gets accepted, gets onboarded. HR onboards the driver and asks, what are your revenue goals? Driver says, 150K. Your ad says 144 to 168. 150K is probably realistic. Recruiter says, the onboarding HR person says, what's your home time requirements? When do you want to be at home? She says, my daughter's birthday is on April 4th, and I want to be home, and I want to be home every other Sunday. My preferred lanes are Idaho to Colorado. Good, great. It goes into a file, and it stays in the file.
So think about that. This is going into the whole recruiting, not only recruiting, but retention of drivers. So your HR person is doing all this great work of trying to get all these good drivers and making all these somewhat promises sometimes. But then where does that information go? Who monitors it? And then when you're doing that exit review for that driver, it goes all right back to, well, thought I could get this, I was promised this, and then this is where I'm at today.
Well, because the load planner and the dispatcher don't know about this. In most cases, they don't know. And in the heat of the dispatch process, they certainly will not remember. Even if they were told, they will not remember. Is that a problem or a mistake of the dispatcher or load planner? No. From our perspective, it's an informational problem. Is that the fact that the information doesn't flow through the entire process in a way that when the load planner sees a load that goes from Denver, not to Idaho, but from Denver to California, the load planner can say, I'm not going to put this driver on this lane because I know he's going to be unhappy. Or the load planner can say, hey, I don't know who else to put on that load, and what am I going to do? I'm going to put that driver on, but I'm going to ask the dispatcher to go to give the driver a call and say, I'm sorry, we know you hate this, but please help us out here. Next time we'll make sure you'll be treated better. And so if you have the information, you can make those decisions, you can take these actions. But today, the way information and data flows in a carrier cannot address these issues. Does it move the needle? Is all these tools, all this data, all the technology, does it actually make a difference? So for this carrier with 300 drivers, we calculate the cost hidden in their processes. And for them, it was $18,000 per driver per year. For the size of them, it was about $5.5 million in their business that was hidden in these processes and information flows that were just very, very inefficient. It's about, again, the impact of doubling their fleet size, if you can address those. Anything?
Yeah, I think too, when you want to think about this, when we talk about how we calculate, we talked about earlier, is like some of it's in the time it takes to do it, a lot of it's in human error. But think about with this customer specifically, the one thing that we also found for them is service failures. But what does that mean? You get a happy customer. If I reduce your service failures, not only is your customer happier, but the chances of you getting more business from that customer or additional customers has now increased. So you look at it a couple of different ways. It's not just in current savings, but it's also in revenue gain and customer satisfaction.
And this is before applying any fancy AI or data science or machine learning to your business, because in most cases, most carriers actually don't have the data to apply these technologies to their business before they can. So this is before even thinking of the potential of doing even better.
You don't know what you don't know. You don't
Correct.
know what you don't know.
So what's the new way? What's the new way forward? About 10 years ago, a new type of business was really created in California at that time by companies who took a different perspective. Kind of like my great-grandfather who decided to be in the sugar business instead of deciding to be in the beverage distribution business. They took a very different perspective. And they looked at taxis, they looked at hotels, they looked at shops. And they found a way to think of themselves differently and still become the largest company by thinking differently. As you all know, the world's largest taxi company today is Uber. The world's largest hotel company doesn't own any hotels, is actually Airbnb. And the world's largest retailer actually don't own, well, they own maybe one or two physical stores, but by and large, they don't own physical stores, but they own digital stores. I don't think that trucking companies are the same as an Uber and Airbnb or an Amazon. They're very different. And I could make an argument why they're different, but leave that aside. What we can take away from these companies is the new perspective they took. It's a new perspective that a business can be fundamentally about workflows, processes, and information flows. And once we start thinking about ourselves in terms of processes and information flows, you may make different decisions about your business. You may look at cost differently. Maybe cost is not just fuel, driver pay, and your equipment and your insurance. Maybe cost is actually the cost of things that you miss because you make mistakes. So start thinking about your business from the perspective of how does work and information flow through your organization. So these companies created digitally native businesses that are actually running their business in software. Transportation management software, TMSs, don't by and large allow you to do that today. They allow you to run your business in the real life, and then you hire someone who keys in data. And then sometimes it's print or issues an invoice, but you don't really run your business in it. Where we see the biggest opportunity for fleets today is actually to digitally run your business natively in software so that all your processes get handled in it, and you suddenly capture the data, you can automate parts of it, and you can make better decisions as a fleet owner in your business. So beyond trucks, we built a platform, frankly, in our own fleet as a workflow-centric platform where we digitize all the workflows, and then we start putting smart automation behind it. Smart automation means not just random automation, it means automating the parts that can be automated, handing it back to the human to make a decision when the human is most valuable. And it also allows you to use smart data, so advanced analytics to decide what loads to take, what lanes to take, and how to dispatch your drivers. As a result of that, you get to much deeper cost efficiency in your fleet, and you get to much better visibility. So maybe some thoughts on how this customer of ours, the fleet hauler, changed their business.
So we showed you originally what they look like with all their different whiteboards and all of their different magnets and everything they put in there. So what we actually were able to do with them, again, technology these days is completely different than what you think about what it was before, right? Today you can pick up your phone and pretty much find and look for anything. So what we were able to do is instead of them going into the platforms of every one of their customers, we actually go into it ourselves with an AI. We go in it, we scrape the data for them, we do all the calculations, and we tell them and generate the next load. We tell them when they should, we tell them how much they should. The other thing is sometimes you think there's no way a computer could do this. We were able to take everything from their head and say like, hey, okay, I got to pick up premium and I want to pick up unleaded. I'm going to put these two together and I'm going to go, I'm going to be the most efficient. I'm going to fill my truck, right? So all that logic goes into it. So this now is what this screen that you're looking at here actually replaces their Excel spreadsheet and their handwritten formulas that they were putting in. This now also gives them a complete view of every load, of every driver, where they're at, where they're destined to go. We track a couple of different things for them. Not only do they want to track the driver, but they want to track the trailer because sometimes they do drop and hook. Sometimes they need to leave their trailer somewhere to be washed out or things like that. We can track both at the same time. We also have the ability to track the drivers by an actual app itself versus just, in some of their instances, we have some customers that are that don't require them to use ELDs because either they have an ag or they're the 150 or their grandfather. So we can actually track drivers by their phones on the app.
So again, summing it up, on average, what we see is disconnected processes, disconnected data, create on average in the US about $10,000 per driver per fleet per year. That's something even if you want to continue to spend it, you probably are better off spending it on driver pay than anything else. Mm-hmm. You can certainly reappropriate those funds for much better use.
I don't think you think of it sometimes when we go into some of these customers. In other places, you think, oh, automation means you reduce the head count. Okay, I now go to Walmart. There's no people there's no cash registers, actual cashiers. There's just computers. That's not necessarily what we come in to say. When we say we can save you time, it means now you can use that person who understands the business and put them in much more important roles, like getting more business, like customer service, customer satisfaction, or maybe actually talking to the driver and actually because drivers love to have someone to talk to every day. So you move them into what makes the most sense for the business.
Well, part of the work we do is managing change with our customers because oftentimes you're used to running your business a certain way. And there's really two sides of that equation. We think as technology provider, we need to meet our customers where they are, but at the same time, actually we need to do more. We need to make it even easier on them to make that friction in adopting new software much easier. We all hate switching, right? We all hate switching from a Samsung phone to an iPhone. We all hate it. So the only way to do that more comfortably is by making it super easy on people. Mm-hmm. Part of the work that's really critical that we've experienced is that you start working with everyone in your team really early on. We start day one usually with the most junior people in the organization. That could be your accounts receivable clerk. It could be your payroll clerk. It could be dispatcher. It doesn't have to be senior management. Of course, we work with senior management, but the process really starts understanding how they work. It starts with giving them a little bit of a sense where there's opportunities to make their life easier. And in many cases, the funny thing is they know how to make their life easier, but they may be afraid to ask, or they may be afraid to
Or they don't believe that the logic, they don't believe that you can put logic into a computer.
So oftentimes in that conversation with a team, we realize that people actually have a vision of how their work could be much easier. So they co-create that vision of the future. Sometimes we work with customers and they say, I don't actually know why I'm running this way. I have no idea.
I've done it like this forever. This is how I've always done it, so I'm going to keep doing it.
And then sometimes they change their base process without any technology. That's actually the best outcome, we always feel. And then typically we have technology in our platform, or we adapt our technology to automate and reduce the actual workload in that process. So that part is something that we do in our black box, so to speak, before we go into rollout. But what's really important, and what a lot of people like, people like automation as long as it deals with people. And we think the best thing that a carrier can do today is to be centered around people, leveraging automation to be even more people-centric. So that's generally what we feel everyone loves and everyone likes about technologies, not to replace them, but to make them better. This is one of the things I always share at the end of our presentation. This is an ad, I think, that speaks to many of us in the industry, especially those who run carriers that have existed for decades or generations. And I truthfully think that our carriers, our customers, think about their business very similarly. So this is an ad about a watch, a Swiss watch, a Patek Philippe, very expensive watch. But what it says, you never actually own a Patek Philippe. You merely look after it for the next generation. A lot of our carriers think about their business the same way. They think about their business as something that they look after for their children to have a better life, or for their children to have a starting ground to take it to the next level. And so a lot of the carriers we work with want to make sure, as they're downloading their wisdom to us, that their children can carry forward the business, and technology often helps them in that. So that transition is very valuable to a lot of customers by us aligning with them and thinking, how can we help you make sure that the next generation has all the tools and the skills to run their business more efficiently. And funnily enough, we realize a lot of young people today don't want to come into the trucking industry because they're scared of blue and green screens, or they're scared of Windows 97 technology, right? So we realize that technology is really a part of that conversation. It's also of the conversation that, when Kennedy said we go to the moon, had to the American people. It is a little bit about the future. And a lot of our carriers do want to think about how will we take this business to the next level. And there's still, after the speech, in our experience, there's one image that really captures impact. This is probably the best picture that captures impact of the human race on a different planet, is this picture. And there's no coincidence that we as a company want to accompany our carriers on that journey, and we have picked as an image for our company, really, that logo, because it's the print of a tire on the ground. And we hope that by working with our carriers, we can help them move to the future. Not necessarily the moon, but hopefully move to the future.
And leave an imprint.
Thank you, everyone. We are open for questions. Happy to a lively discussion. We have microphones in the back if we need any.
If not, we're good.
Any questions?
Nope, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.